everyone, and here's welcoming you to another Learning Byte on birth order. In the earlier Learning Bytes, we had talked about the behavioral traits of the firstborn. In the next Learning Byte, we had talked about the behavioral traits on the secondborn, and this time we are going to focus on the thirdborn. I know a lot of you will come and tell me that I have only 2 kids, so how do I apply this? Well, chances are that there would be traits from the thirdborn, or perhaps the lastborn you might call them, which would get transferred on to the secondborn if they are the last people to be born in the family. So I'm going to start with a story. It's a small story, and it actually showed to me a long time ago how our behavior starts getting carved out from the time of our birth. It goes back to my college years. I had a friend who was support staff, a health worker, working in an orphanage. So she would go once a week maybe and check out on the kids. So I asked her once that, you must be really having a great time. Everybody loves babies. It must be such fun playing with the babies. And then she told me something pretty strange. She said, we are not even allowed to go near the babies. Until the babies are at least 6 months old, nobody can just go and play with the child. So I asked her why, and she said, well, the strict policy of the orphanage was, if the child is less than 6 months old, you cannot carry them because the number of hands, helping hands, were very less as compared to the number of babies. And if the babies got used to being picked up, it would mean a lot of problems because, they would be continuously wanting to be picked up and mollycoddled. And they didn't want to do that. They didn't want anyone to get attached to a kid, or the kids to get attached to a person who might leave. Now, when I heard this, I immediately felt pretty sad for the babies, and I said, oh, poor things, it's so unfair. And she said, don't think that they are that simple. They are very smart kids. She said, the kids want to be picked up. They really want to be picked up. And because no one is coming on their own, they have devised their own ways to get noticed. And what do? Well, babies understand that if they cough or it looks as if they've got something stuck in their throat, somebody will come and help them out. So babies as small as 6 months old knew how to manipulate the system to get themselves picked up. She said, it's so funny when you see them because you can make out that it's a fake cough, but they are still coughing, and it's funny. So though it seemed very funny over the years, when I think about it, I realize this is exactly how we all are, especially when you're looking at the youngest child. They have a lot of people on whom the parents are showering their attention to. For instance, the other kids, and they have a lot of other things which will keep them busy. And these lastborns are adept at getting attention. They're really smart. These lastborns, they have such creative methods of getting attention, but when it comes to the name, you find that they're not very creative. The parents, I think, lose it at some level. They are the ones who are stuck with names like Baby, like me. I'm called Baby by my cousins even today, even despite the fact that I have kids of my own and I'm getting grey hair and stuff like that. But no, I'll still be called Baby till the end of my life. I know people who are called Baby Doll, and she's a pretty famous lawyer in the US. I know people who are called Mopsy. I know, names like Chinu, which means baby, again, small, Choti. I mean, these are names which are actually given to the youngest born. And these kids will remain with these names till the end of their lives. You won't find that happening with the eldest kids. But with the youngest kids, we end up giving them names which are, in my opinion, pretty embarrassing. It is a fact that they are spoilt and pampered. It's a fact that when someone comes home with a box of sweets, normally they'll hand it over to the youngest child. It's a fact that people treat you with kid gloves and you can get away with a lot. You can get away with murder. But it's also a fact that last bonds are not taken very seriously. You know, I used to wonder when I was young, how come I don't know much about current affairs? Everybody else in my house does. How come I'm so bad at it? And I realized I don't like reading the paper. And why do I not like reading the paper? Well, when the newspaper comes in the morning, it used to be my father and my mother seeing it first, then the brothers, and by the time the newspaper came to me, it would be in tatters and breakfast would be over. So I never got into the habit of even collecting information that I could actually have a discussion about. So how do you think it would be for a youngest born to express an opinion in front of a group of people who are much older, smarter, bigger than them? Do you think it would be easy? Chances are that they might just lose their voice or not feel comfortable expressing their feelings, their thoughts, and especially anything which requires you to use logic. How can they? I mean, if you remember, every time when they were growing up, they were forced not to have a decision, or they would get nervous trying to come up with a plan. So when they grow up, finally, they take the decisions on the fly. They don't think so much. The whole process is short-circuited and they make a decision quick, fast, and sometimes live to, see the consequences which might not be pleasant. Of course, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But the fact is, the decision-making process is very quick if they decide to do something. And it's not by measuring the pros and cons. It's through the gut. So, last bonds might be served first on the dining table, especially when there's dessert and good stuff. But at the same time, you will find that when it comes to being asked for an opinion, they are also last on the list. So chances are that last bonds are not very good at processing information and being able to convince others. So even when they grow up, they very often have a problem expressing their thoughts. Because can you imagine how it must be for this little kid? You have an opinion, you try to express it. The older people in the house are much bigger in size, much smarter, much wiser. And they can give you a counter argument so quick that all your thoughts just disappear. How do you find, or where do you find the courage to fight? How do you think all this impacts the youngest kid? Very often they end up not being able to express their feelings in a group. They somehow get a little intimidated because they're so overwhelmed by the sheer size and the intellect of their elder siblings that they don't find it easy to express their emotions or feelings. I used to wonder for the longest of time why I start feeling so uncomfortable in a big group. But over a period of time, I've understood it. It doesn't come from the fact that anybody has actually done anything, but it's just that I feel uncomfortable because I felt overwhelmed way back then. Sometimes the elder siblings can get aggressive. There's a lot of emotion when little baby, the crown prince, the new prince rather, has displaced these children. There's resentment, there's jealousy, a lot of questions. Why is it that this baby gets everything and we don't? And sometimes they take it out on the small child. Not include them in their games. I remember not being included, in the games that my elder siblings played. Sometimes it can get rough. It can be violent also. It can be a merciless form of teasing. With many families, I've seen that. And that creates an even bigger fear in the child. Now, research has shown that the youngest child very often goes into a freeze zone because they get so scared at times and they can't make out. They feel insecure, they feel vulnerable, and all their logical thinking goes for a toss. So they can very often be in that very frozen state, not being able to act. And they might be able to, or they might end up repeating the same pattern as they grow up. Every time they have somebody shouting, somebody being rough on them, you'll find that they will go into this complete silent zone where they won't be able to express what they're saying. Research has shown this. If the child, for whatever reason, does not manage to rebel against these larger forces which surround him or her, they might end up being the lost child. You know, you've seen those slightly lost children. They don't know exactly where to fit in. They don't know what they feel. They regress very easily into their childhood behaviors. Like every time they are in stress, they might break down. You'll notice that the eyes suddenly become round. Their voice becomes very childish. It's a actual regression, because that's what they have learned. The only way they can deal with it, the stress, is to reach out and by being helpless. Now they have what you call learned helplessness. Actually, all lastborns have the habit of imbibing helplessness as a way of life, but the lost child will use it a lot more than others. The lost child will have a tendency not to be in large groups. They start getting threatened. They have to feel comfortable and safe. If they are in a group where, maybe they might be made fun of or they don't feel secure, they immediately retire into the shell. They won't come out. Their friend circle will be small and limited. They will stay with the same people for a very long time. It takes them time to open up and make new friends because trust becomes an issue with them. So what else do these lastborns do apart from being, helpless? Well, you notice that if you talk to them very often, they will bring up issues like being ignored. In some way or other, it's about not being heard. It's a pattern. And it's not actually necessarily referring to the current situation which they might be facing. It could be an office, it could be a friend circle, it could be a family group, but it comes from a childhood. Another thing which the lastborns do is consciously become the opposite of their siblings. If the elder siblings are naughty and continuously getting into trouble, the youngest born will tend to do just the opposite. Show the parents that somehow he or she is better. Remember, the world of the lastborn is very confusing. One moment they're getting mollycoddled, another moment they're completely ignored, another moment they're being teased, another moment they're being told what to do. It's very rare for anyone to pay too much attention to the youngest born. So they grow up in a world of their own. And they develop a certain sense of cockiness, sarcastic humor almost. And that's what sets them apart. They can be the life of the party, they can be a lot of fun, but a lot of it is also to cover their own sense of self-doubt and confusion. And all this getting ignored is one of the best things that help the lastborn. They become so persistent because they need to prove their point that they matter, that they exist, and you better listen to me kind of attitude. And they do this by being persistent. So if there's something which catches their fancy, if there's something which they really want to do in their life, they are the most persistent to achieve it. I mean, they will go out of the way, they'll go all out. They're not scared of failure. They will think of 10 different ways to reach the same target. And in case they don't get it, they'll find another way. And I think that is one of the biggest strengths for the last born. They've been made enough fun of, so there's not much to lose. They don't have a sense of self-importance in that way that, oh, I have to be perfect. They don't mind losing at times. But they definitely need to prove their point to the world that they matter. And I think that's God's gift to me and a lot of last borns. And with that, we come to the end of this learning bite. I hope you enjoyed it. And in the next learning bite, we will be talking about the only borns and twins. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed putting it up together for you. Please give us your feedback about what you think about it on our FB page, and we'll be so happy to respond. See you soon. Goodbye.